Hi, Tevi. Can you unmute yourself, please, so we can hear you, and then the session can begin? Thank you.
Hi, Joe. Can I?
Great, thank you. Please begin the session. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Hi. Good day, everyone. Good morning from the Pacific. Good evening to you. Good afternoon from wherever you're joining. I'd like to welcome you to this session, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. So today, we're fortunate to have four speakers who will be giving us an overview of the EU program in the region that is supported through the World Bank, and also some of the programs that are being undertaken in particular countries. So we will have a speaker from the EU delegation, who is based out of the PICs office in PICs office, and also one speaker from Vanuatu, one from Solomon Islands, and one from Samoa. So let's invite our key speakers. Firstly, let's invite Miss Andrea Vidal, who is the program manager from the External Relations Office in the EU delegation in Fiji. So Andrea, if you can just wave your hand so that everyone can say hi to everyone.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening to the ones joining from other parts of the world than Pacific.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. So Andrea will be, providing an overview of the ACP-EU NDRR activities in the region. And also, we're fortunate to have an official from the Vanuatu government, Ms. Eslyn Bule. Ms. Eslyn is the Director General for the Vanuatu Ministry of Climate Change. Eslyn is a seismologist by profession, and also masters in engineering geology. So it's a profession that you'll hardly find women interested in the region. So we're glad to have Eslyn joining us. So Eslyn, if you can just say hi so that everyone can see you. All right, so Eslyn can join us later. So Eslyn will be giving us a presentation on the DRM policy reforms that are happening in Vanuatu to strengthen coordination and DRM systems in Vanuatu. Today we are also fortunate to have Dr. Melkwaya Mataki, who is the Permanent Secretary from the Solomon Islands Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, Disaster Management, and Meteorology. Melkwaya holds a PhD in specializing in environmental science, and holds several key positions within the Solomon Islands government, and previously held academic and research positions at the University of the South Pacific. So Mel, if you can wave your hand and say hi to everyone.
Thank you, Tevi, and good morning all.
All right, thank you, Mel. Thanks for joining us. So Mel will be presenting on the finding of a study that the bank supported obviously through the funding, through the EU funding on the Honiara Flood Risk Management Study. And finally, our final speaker today will be Malaki Jacopo. So Malaki is the acting Chief Executive Officer for the Water Resource Division from the Ministry of Resources and Environment in Samoa. Now he holds other key positions in the government, including the chairman for the Pacific Hydrology Panel under the Pacific Meteorological Council, and also is the hydrological advisor to the WMO. So Malaki also, Bachelor of Science in Ecology and Environmental Conservation, and also currently pursuing a master's in water management. Malaki, do you want to wave your hand and say hi to everyone?
Thank you very much, Tevi. Aloha, everyone. It's good to be here. It's an honor to be here today, and looking forward to our discussions. Yeah, and I'll just say hello for now. Hi.
Okay, thanks, Malaki. So Malaki will be giving us a presentation on the progress towards achieving a sustainable multi-asset early warning system in Samoa. So the format for the session today, I'll be giving it presenter 10 minutes, for their talk. And then towards the end, I'll open up for panel discussions. So during the presentation, I'd like the audience to listen carefully. You'll hear the different natural assets, disasters that these countries are faced with. And also you'll also be able to hear the progress that the countries have made, particularly for Samoa in the multi-asset early warning system, investment activities there to strengthen the systems. And for Vanuatu, you'll hear about the DRM policies that the government has undertaken to strengthen coordination, improve coordination, and also strengthen the DRM systems in country. And for Solomon Islands, you'll hear about the findings of the Honiara Flood Study. So while listening, I'd like the audience and also the presenters to think about how you can contribute to the discussions at the end, because I'd like the discussions to be very focused, because time will be a constraint. So I'd like the discussions to be focused around two particular themes. One is the commonalities of experience in the multi-asset early warning system for the 3 particular countries. Although also for the audience, any similarities or that you can bring into the discussions that you can share with the panel, that would be great to hear from as well. And also what the respective countries have done to build resilience, in terms of resourcing their activities, and what's needed, the gaps that still needs to be addressed. So I'd like the discussions today to be based around those 2 particular areas, and to keep the discussions focused. So without further ado, I'll hand over the floor to our first speaker, Ms. Andrea. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Devi, for this introduction. Now let me just share my screen so you can all see the presentation. Here it is. I hope you can see the presentation. If somebody can please confirm.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So as Devi already mentioned, my name is Andrea Vidal, and I'm a program manager at the delegation for the European Union for the Pacific. We cover 13 countries in our delegation, and we have a separate delegation in PNG and a separate delegation also in the region in Timor-Leste. So in my presentation today, I will present you the examples from the Pacific region from the ACP European Union Natural Disaster Risk Reduction Program. And at the end, I will also briefly describe the future priorities of the European Union for the region to show you a bit what opportunities are there for the countries and to see how the disaster risk management fits into these priorities. Now, if I go to my first slide, launched in 2011, the African, Caribbean, Pacific, or shortly ACP European Union Natural Disaster Risk Reduction Program, has supported over 70 ACP countries through around 149 projects. It implements technical assistance, capacity building, and knowledge sharing activities to support disaster prevention and preparedness to post-disaster response in ACP countries. The program represents 54.5 million euros of funding from the European Union, and the Pacific portfolio represents 11.6 million euros, which is about $15.3 million of funding. Overall, we have 26 projects under this program that have been implemented in the Pacific region, including 5 regional projects, 13 country-level projects, and 8 post-disaster and recovery projects. Through these projects, including the regional ones, nearly all Pacific countries have benefited from the ACP European Union NDRR funded activities, and 10 out of 14 Pacific countries have specifically benefited from the country level and post-disaster activities. Finally, let me mention also the latest demand from the Pacific countries has focused on the technical assistance for institutional strengthening for disaster risk management. And this was done in PNG, Fiji, Samoa, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. Moving to the next slide, to briefly mention, through the 26 projects implemented across the Pacific, the program has helped governments establish disaster risk and climate change adaptation as national policies and as national priorities. So, and this slide here shows some of the results achieved in the Pacific region through the support of the ACP-EU NDRR Program. The program activities have basically boosted the long-term resilience in key sectors such as construction, housing, and tourism. And some of the highlights include strengthening policy and institutional frameworks for disaster risk management in several Pacific countries, including PNG, Samoa, Fiji, Tuvalu, or Vanuatu. The highlights also include technical assistance to support countries in the region to deploy drones for risk information and post-disaster assessment, as well as targeted knowledge creation, such as with the climate vulnerability assessment in Fiji or supporting analytics for the Pacific catastrophe risk assessment and financing initiative. To provide you with an example of a regional project, let me mention the project on utilizing unmanned aerial vehicles, better known as drones, for disaster assessment in the Pacific Islands. This is the so-called UAV for Resilience project, WOW for Resilience project. The project developed the capacity and readiness of Fiji and Tonga to deploy drones for disaster and climate risk assessment, and to rapidly also identify damage to the physical environment in post-disaster situations. The tools that were developed included best practices on the use of drones and a roadmap to guide the deployment of drones to generate high-resolution images. These documents can now be used by the governments of Fiji and Tonga and are replicated in also other contexts. The trainings also, they were provided to national staff and led to concrete improvements in the participants' use of drones in their day-to-day operations, and they helped them inform response decision-making. There was also a guidance note that was published to document the best uses of drones in collecting geospatial data in Pacific Island states, and is intended to be used by local technological agencies that are looking to integrate drone usage into their data collection workflow. Now, moving to the country-level projects, several country-level projects strengthen disaster management policies in Pacific Island countries. These country-level projects have developed national policy and regulatory frameworks to address the threat of climate and weather-induced disasters. This was done in Fiji, Samoa, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and PNG. Here we should also mention the revised disaster risk management and climate change adaptation policies that really have a direct impact on promoting resilient infrastructure. For example, the New Building Act of Tuvalu or the one of Fiji. These new policies are also really the result of an inclusive and truly the whole society approach. Each Pacific Island countries asked for expertise and feedback from a broad representation of actors to design the new disaster risk management frameworks. So the program responded to specific requests for post-disaster assessments and resilient recovery planning, which led to 28 government-led post-disaster assessments. This followed some of the major disaster events in the past years in the Pacific, and they include post-disaster needs assessment in Fiji for cyclones Ivan in 2012, and Winston, as we all remember, in 2016. The post-disaster needs assessment for Cyclone Ivan in Samoa in 2012, the same type of assessment following floods in Solomon Islands in 2014, in Tonga for Cyclone Ian in 2014 and Chida in 2018, and in Vanuatu following the tropical cyclone Pam in 2015. Now, this was a short overview of the ACP European Union NDRR program activities in the Pacific. Now, let me briefly also present you the future EU priorities for the region and how the disaster risk management fits into this context. I can tell you that the European Union prepared a new European Union funding support framework for the Pacific for the next 7 years. It starts this year, 2021 until 2027. And the EU priorities and Pacific priorities will be defined in the Pacific Multi-Country Multi-Annual Indicative Program, complicated name, but it has a shorter name, Pacific MIP, that's a bit easier. It will cover national and multi-country programs in 13 Pacific Island countries, which are covered by our delegation based in Fiji. And in addition, there will be a separate regional multi-annual indicative program for Asia and the Pacific for the same 7-year period, which will provide a framework for regional programs benefiting all 15 countries, and this includes also PNG and Timor-Leste. The two documents have the same 3 broad priority areas and are in line with the European Union and the Pacific strategies. Now, in this next slide, you can see these priorities. If you look into them, you will see priority area 1 is climate action and environmental sustainability. Second priority is inclusive and sustainable economic development. And the third, fundamental values, human development, peace and security. To mention that the first two priorities will represent around 85% of the funding. And to go more deeply into where our topic fits into that priorities, you will see it fits very well into priority area 1. Here we have climate adaptation, resilience, recovery. Really under this priority area 1, the European Union can support the Pacific countries to adapt to the effects of climate change, to improve their overall resilience to natural disasters, to support recovery efforts in case of severe events and crises, and to meet the international commitments under the Paris Agreement and the Sendai framework. The objective is really to assist the Pacific Island countries to develop, review, and to implement the national adaptation plans and the disaster risk management plans, as well as to mainstream and integrate climate change adaptation and disaster risk management into national regulatory and institutional frameworks, including measures such as reviewing building codes, urban planning, excuse me, and very importantly, also integrating disaster risk and responses into the national budget and investment planning. In addition, the European Union can support Pacific to invest in increased resilience in terms of coastal protection, early warning systems, water, food security, and health measures, as well as to relocate the most vulnerable communities when required. There was some project already in the past that focused on that. So you will see that basically there's a lot of opportunities under this new framework for the next 7 years. And we will definitely continue to work in this area. It's one of the priorities, as you see. In the meantime, even before we go into the new programming, we also still have the European Development Fund 11. And under this fund, we are preparing a new program on building safety and resilience in the Pacific. It's called the BSRP2. It follows a previous BSRP1 phase that some of you might know. We have around 14 million euros budget for this program, and the objective will be to reduce the impact of disasters, including those related to climate change and biological hazards, and to increase resilience in Pacific Island countries. This program is not yet signed, but we plan to sign it with SPC probably by the end of the year or beginning of next year. So I hope this provides a good overview and introduction to the session. I will conclude my presentation here today, and I'm really looking forward to hear the speakers of this session on the concrete examples and implementation in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea, for the good overview of the EU program in the region. So let's hand over the floor to Eslyn. I'm not sure if Eslyn is connected now. Eslyn, are you connected?
No, not yet, Sebi.
Oh, not yet. Okay, so let's move on to Dr. Melchior, then back to Eslyn later if she's able to join. Melchior, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hello, can you unmute, please? Thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much, Tevi, and thank you, fellow panelists and others who are joining in virtually. I'll actually be speaking about a study which we have partnered with the World Bank and GFDRR to implement in the Solomon Islands. And this is actually a flood risk study that was done for Honiara, which is the capital of Solomon Islands. If you could just move on to the next slide, Hugo. Thank you. So the study actually focused on Honiara, and as I said, it's just a study which has been requested following the 2014 floods that we had, which actually caused, which had many fatalities and also caused a huge setback to our economy as well. The damages were estimated about 9% of our GDP. Go on to the next slide, please. So that's just the background of that, which I've just shared. That picture basically showed to an area which has been badly impacted by the floods in 2014. What's also important to note is that although the flood was caused devastation, we still see that people are wanting to go back to build back in the same places. So these are some of the challenges that we have. Climate change is certainly there, but the rapid urban growth is also an issue we face within the Solomon Islands, and especially here in Honiara. Go on to the next slide, please. The first part of the study actually focused on understanding flooding within Honiara. So a lot of this was basically involved having our different our technical assistants and the consultants having to develop models that could help in providing an understanding of the flooding in Honiara. And this in itself is a very important set. It provided an important set of information for the government. And I think even before this program or this project was completed, the results or the flood maps that came out from this study from stage 1 were actually used by some of the major infrastructure developments that are being done, that are being prepared for the Solomon Islands to host the South Pacific Games in 2023. So I can say here that the assessments and the maps that have been made, and also the models that have been developed and the outputs that have come out from that have actually been very useful, even from a very early stage. Thank you. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So in stage 2 was really to understand the flood problems and risks, and this involved the collection of building and population data, and also to validate the models based on what we have seen in Honiara, and also in relation to other similar events in the Pacific Islands, and also an assessment of risks to critical infrastructure, roads, human life, and the economy. So that's basically stage 2 of it. But what's important out here as well is that our different stakeholders nationally, at the national level within the government, as well as down to the community levels within Honiara, they've had also an opportunity to provide feedback to this particular stage of the study. And I think this is where these studies can really be made very useful, in that they also depend on inputs from stakeholders, people who have been affected, and that gives not only a validation angle to the study itself, but it also gives you an opportunity for communities to be heard, and also to see the experiences that they've had with flooding in Honiara. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So from stage 1 and stage 2, in understanding the flood risks and looking at evaluating the flood risks, the stage 3 actually focused on identifying and evaluating options to come up with a flood management plan. And at this stage as well, stakeholders were actually used as well. A lot of stakeholder inputs and also training of stakeholders in the use of some tools, which as we went by with the project, we also noted the importance of having some web-based tools that can be used by people who have some understanding of flood risks, and basically to at least have some inbuilt country capacity to be able to understand flooding, but also to use other tools to support decision making. The important aspect of this is that we do have options that have been recommended through this study to look at ameliorating or more the risks that we have in terms of flooding. So you've got it on the slide there. Options to modify flooding, options to modify exposed and vulnerability, and options to improve emergency response. So I think a lot of the first two sets of options, if we're looking at modifying flooding and options to modify exposed and vulnerability, it is a lot of it, especially with the second one. It is very much dependent on a number of different stakeholders here, whereby it cannot be just government, for example. We have to look at the participation of stakeholders in the private sector as well as individuals as well. So these are things that are very important. Of course, when you look at the options to modify flooding, for example, some of the options that have been looked at, of course, will have some capital costs associated with that, and this is something that we really would like to take going forward, looking at what has come out from this study and packaging them to programs and projects that can be used to address the flooding risks that we have in country. In terms of options to improve emergency response, this is where the ministry that I'm in charge of, this is where we have a greater role to play. And on this, we have started some work already on flood early warning systems, but also just weather warnings in general. And that is to see that the warnings that we give out are really understood, and people can also associate themselves to the warnings that are given out by authorities. So I think there's a lot of work that needed to be done as well in this particular area. But I think overall, I'd like to say here that the project, whilst it is a study, I think it gave us a lot of different detailed and evidence-based options based on studies that have been carried out. And that in itself is a big plus, especially when it comes to decision making and also making a case to government and other stakeholders as well, to see that the issue of flooding within Honiara is taken care of. And I think the other point which I would also like to make, and which I've stressed it earlier as well, is that whilst we would like to see support directed towards addressing these gaps, we are internally within government as well. We are also using it as an opportunity to really bring the issue of flooding, of flood risks to the fore within government as well, that this is something that we really needed to look at it more in depth, and also across different across sectors, and especially in urban development in Honiara. So I think those are some of the other broader benefits that we see from this study. And as I said earlier on, even at the very early stage of the studies, the outputs, the results that came out have actually been have been used to support infrastructure developments that are taking place. And as a matter of fact, a lot of other stakeholders are also after this information. So we are just finalizing everything, and we will be going back to the government to get a clearance on this, and also to see that the government takes on board the plan that has come out from this study. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Melquite. So I just wanted to check if Eslyn is already connected. Eslyn, can you hear us?
No, unfortunately not, Terry. I think she's having some connection issues.
Okay, so let's go to Malaki, and hopefully Eslyn can join us for the last presentation. So Malaki, over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all, and thank you very much, Tevi, for that introduction, and also the presentation from our colleagues in the Solomon Islands. So basically today I will just be talking to you about some of the efforts in Samoa towards a sustainable multi-hazard early warning system, as well as the progress of some of the work that's been done through the support from the EU ACP as well as the World Bank. So just a country context to start us off. As you are all aware, Samoa, like many SIDS, is highly vulnerable to a range of hydrometeorological as well as geohazards. And the country recognizes this, and as such, the strategy for the development of Samoa emphasizes and recognizes that more extreme weather events in the future are likely to increase the number and scale of disasters, which will eventually result in long-term impacts on the country's development agenda. So Samoa is located south of the equator in the heart of Polynesia. Hopefully most of you have been here and enjoy our beautiful island. We have two main islands with a total land area of 2,800 square kilometers. Our population is around 200,000, with 70% and much of the infrastructure residing in the coastal zones or the coastal floodplains. And as such, these are very much exposed to the elements and affected by natural disasters. Close to 20% of the population live in the capital Apia. So you can imagine the amount of infrastructure that are situated in this very vulnerable area. Samoa in the last 12 years have been affected by up to 9 natural and climate-induced disasters. And it's had a lot of impact, including the loss of life, homes, businesses, infrastructure, and livelihoods. In 2009, the tsunami killed 143 people and costed an estimated 310 million Samoan tala, equivalent to 20% of the country's GDP at the time. A few years later, severe floods and winds from the Category 4 Tropical Cyclone Evan resulted in 12 deaths, temporary displacement of approximately 7,500 people, and damages totaling an estimated 480 million Samoan tala, equivalent to approximately 28% of our GDP in 2011. Sorry about the typo there, it's 2011 GDP. So the government of Samoa, amongst many efforts, has tried to adapt and reduce risks to disasters, and as such have invested in strengthening early warning system and preparedness of communities through the support of many partners. Since 2016, the Pacific Resilience Program was launched to implement a series of activities that included the design, development, and strengthening of a multi-hazard early warning system for Samoa. This also included the provision of technical assistance and support from the EU ACP to introduce and bring in world best practices to our multi-hazard early warning system. Next slide, please. Some of the key activities through the PREP project support include the upgrade and the maintenance, as well as the expansion of our monitoring networks. The upgrades include enabling monitoring stations to have telemetry capability to enable the integration and sharing of near real-time data amongst the different stakeholders, such as the meteorology, water resources, and disaster management office. And it's good to hear the presentation from our EU office in Fiji, as this upgrade of systems was first piloted under the EU Water Sector Support Program, where the technology was introduced and was then rolled out and sort of upgraded or expanded by the World Bank PREP program. Also, the project has been able to construct a 6.4 million Samoan Tala National Emergency Operational Center with facilities to house and coordinate all the stakeholders during emergency situations. So there are some pictures there of our newly constructed EOC building. Together with that, or most importantly as well, is the establishment of a multi-hazard early warning system, which integrates monitoring networks and data from all key agencies. And also this will be complemented by the flood decision support system for the Apia urban area. And it also brings in other works such as the flood modeling and simulation and mapping works for different flood scenarios, such as the ones that we've seen from our presentation from Solomon Islands. All these efforts will hopefully inform the developments, preparedness and response efforts across the country. Also, to complement the technical work, there is a lot of investment now going into the governance systems with the development of a comprehensive and effective multi-hazard early warning system policy and legal framework. So one of the biggest developments has been the newly enacted Meteorology, Geoscience and Ozone Services Act 2021, which was funded under the project, as well as the formulation of a number of community disaster and climate risk management plans. And my main topic for today is on the development of the multi-hazard early warning system policy, which is one of the key components under this project. Some of the ongoing activities include training, knowledge management, and system improvements. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So I'd just like to finish off my talk today by talking about the national multi-hazard early warning system policy. At the moment, we're now in the final stages of consultations. Excuse me, Tim. So at the moment, we're in the final stages of consultations towards the finalization of our multi-hazard early warning system policy, which is being developed by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment with the support from the EU ACP and World Bank technical assistance and the different teams. So the policy essentially establishes a government-wide approach to reduce risks from multiple hazards, recognizing that advanced warning and information is critical to preventing hazards from becoming disasters. This will cover all the interrelated elements of early warning systems, from knowledge of hazards and vulnerabilities through to preparedness and capacity to respond. So this work draws on lessons learned and good practices from around the world, as provided by our World Bank and ACP-EU teams. And the policy basically highlights the current situation and challenges that's facing early warning systems or the provision of early warning in the country, such as governance, that there are different agencies with unclear mandates or overlapping mandates. And also there's quite, with this work in disaster risk reduction and also in early warning systems, there's quite a lot of different governance levels. with the diverse stakeholders and their different interests. Also, we looked at the current situation in terms of resourcing with the limited finances going towards the upgrading of our monitoring networks, and also the need for more financing to go towards the upgrade of technology, provision of the different databases to be upgraded, and make sure that the data is all integrated and also is effectively shared. There was also a look at the capacity constraints that we have at the moment in regards to the local technicians, the engineers. There's also quite a big capacity constraint in terms of flood modeling, as we've seen also from the Solomon Islands. And so from the top level all the way down to how the communities are able to understand the warnings and respond effectively. And also there was a lot of look into how there's very limited inclusiveness of all stakeholders, especially looking at our marginalized and vulnerable groups. So all of these issues were taken into consideration, and then we tried to formalize how to best approach or tackle these challenges through the policy. So from there, we looked at the conceptual framework, building on global best practices, as mentioned before, and also at the same time recognizing local challenges and local knowledge or traditional knowledge. So the policy is built on 3 pillars, essentially, one being the people-centric early warning elements, early warning system elements, and then we've got the enabling environment, and then the guiding principles. And we've had some extensive consultations carried out with not only internally with the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Disaster Management Office, the Met Office, the Water Resources that look after the flood information. And now I think we're in a place we're now ready to go into the different stakeholders. The policy provides guidance on the challenges, as I mentioned. And yeah, so our overall vision for our policy is a national early warning system that's multi-hazard, evidence-based, end-user centric, inclusive, promotes collaboration and efficiency in planning, as well as implementing actions that will save lives and reduce injuries, damage, and destruction. So similar to the Solomon case, the process in itself has been a learning process where we have discovered a lot of areas where we need to improve to ensure that a multi-hazard early warning system is effective with the best information that can be used to provide advice and warnings to the stakeholders and communities. It has also provided an opportunity to best coordinate and work towards a more sustainable multi-hazard early warning system for Samoa that can continue to be improved as we go along or as we move into the future. Thank you very much for my opportunity, and I hope I've shared enough information on some of the work that's been done in Samoa. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you so much, Malaki. So we're fortunate to have Eslyn connected finally. And Eslyn, I think, given the time limit we have, if you can, if I may ask you to focus mainly on slide number 5 and 6 of your presentation.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Eslyn. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So, yeah. First of all, I would like to mention before going into the next slides, just worth mentioning that the most disastrous event that Vanuatu faced lately, tropical cyclone, two category 5 cyclones, TC Harold and tropical cyclone Pam, that caused the country around 68 billion Vanuatu. And so if I have to focus on the key policy reforms undertaken by the ministry to address the different challenges that Vanuatu was facing. There are a number of policy reforms that have been undertaken, especially in the wake of TCPAM in 2015. First of all, the enactment of the Disaster Risk Management Act in 2019. The Act formally established DRM bodies at the provincial and community levels, such as the provincial disaster committees and community disaster and climate change committees. There is also recognition and establishment of the cluster systems. Under the Act, there is a provision for an emergency fund. A feather was missing in the previous National Disaster Act in 2000. So another reform that was shown in Vanuatu is through the Meteorology, Climate Change, Geological Hazards Act 2016. This act set out a framework for forecasting and hazards. There were no previous substantive legal provision for geophysical hazards forecasting, especially. And furthermore, the Act now gives power to the VMGD to prosecute offenders where vandalism and forecasting early warning system instrumental is concerned. This particular Act established the National Advisory Board for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is taken with advising on the development of strategies and policies for disaster preparedness and reduction. So the ongoing DRM and TCA policy review updates and key reforms are expected to be introduced from these reform activities, mainly the review is undertaken against the National Strategic Disaster Plan or the People's Plan 2030. The review outcome will assist with the informing update process of the Ministry of Climate Change corporate plan, enhance the policy on climate change and disaster risk reduction implementation, and other upcoming policy platforms such as the formulation of the National Adaptation Plan that is coming up in the coming years. And the formulation and finalization of the CCDRR policy implementation. Since the inception of the CCDRR policy, there is no accompanying implementation plan. The implementation plan will enable more clarity and enhance the coordination of efforts by stakeholders within CCDRR space. Thank you, Devi, bearing in mind of the shortness of time. So this is all I can talk about.
Thank you, DTS. I apologize for the very short time you're given. It is what it is. Hopefully next time you'll have a longer time to make a presentation. So, I'm conscious of the time. So, I think let me open it up to the audience. I think, let's do justice for them. Let's open it up for 1 or 2 questions to the panelists, and then I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask the panelists as well, but I'd like to open it up to the floor first. Any burning questions or comments that you want to raise to the presenters? Okay, I take silence as no. So, look, I mean, it's one of the common theme that came across all the presentations is the multi-asset early warning system, and that's a no-brainer for the Pacific countries, given the level of vulnerability in the region. And early warning system is a critical component of the DRM initiatives and programs in the region. So, for Samoa, it's interesting to see the efforts that you put into strengthening your multi-asset early warning system. The NEOP looks very good. The last time I was there, it was still a empty building. So it's good to see that come to conclusion. And the national multi-asset early warning policy. I think that it's the first one in the region. I haven't seen any such policy in other countries, so it'll be interesting to see how you roll out that policy. And for the Solomon Islands, the options in the study identified a number of mitigation or management plan, and one of them is the risk flood early warning systems. For Vanuatu, obviously, some of the reforms that have been undertaken basically to strengthen the early warning system and also provide better security for the equipments out there. So I'd like to ask one question to all the presenters in relation to the early warning system. So, currently you have a quite good warning system for some of the assets. So I'd like to know what sort of early warning systems you have in place and for what particular assets. Where do you see the gaps? And what is your ministry planning to do to address those gaps? So let me start off with Vanuatu first. Eslin, thank you. Okay, let's move on to Malaki in Samoa. So, basically the question is, what are the key factors behind the success of your early warning systems based on your experience, and where do you see the gaps, and what is your ministry planning to address those gaps?
Thank you very much, Tevi, and I think I covered that as well in the person in terms of governance, with the institutional roles that needs to be improved and ironed out.
Sorry, I'm being cut off there, Malaki. So why don't we also ask Mataki Melkoya, do you want to also come in on that particular question for based on Solomon Islands experience? What are the key factors that determine a good and effective early warning system based on your experience? And where do you see the gaps for Solomon Islands, and how is your ministry planning to address those gaps?
Thank you, David. Thank you for that question. I think this early warning systems, I think we really have to look at the full, what will make it useful is it's not just ensuring that we have the right equipment for early warning system in place and you have experts to use that. I think you also have to look at the tail end of it, the final mile, so to speak, in how the warnings will be tailored to the level of understanding of people that across society. And I think this is something that we see as being important. And as I said, we have started with weather warnings as a start, for example, converting them to our local pidgin, for example, so that people can understand. And also, we are piloting, in fact, next week or the week after, we are piloting a flag-based warning system for seafarers. It's a different thing altogether. I mean, with seafarers, small crafts that move from islands, but where the mariners they use to park the boats will be setting up flags that tells people of the, a color green, for example, says that they think it's safe for people to go out, and then orange, people have to watch out, for warnings and whatnot. So I think I'm saying that because it's very important. You can have the latest early warning system in place and you have the right people and experts to do it, but if it's not understood and people are not buying in, then you also have difficulties. But I think the important point is to really focus across the whole chain, from generating the information right down to sharing the information to the public. But I think with respect to the case here in the Solomon Islands, the study itself, the fact that we have science and evidence-based data and information to support the proposals that have been made to address flood risk, I think that's a huge step in itself, in that there is a body of evidence being put in place that has also been scrutinized, not just by experts themselves, but also has had inputs from local community stakeholders as well, and as well as within government. So I think these factors are quite important in as far as getting or making the project a success. And as I presented as I pointed out in my presentation, even some of the information that's coming out, for example, even before a final report came out, they have already been used to support planning towards infrastructures that are currently taking place here in Honiara. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataki. Eslin, I'm not sure if Eslin is connected.
Yes, thank you, Davey. In terms of early warning systems, infrastructure and physical assets, for Vanuatu, the challenges that we face due to damaging cyclones that we face that cause a lot of damage, but otherwise we do our best to establish infrastructures that can at least record any information that will help us to provide warning to our people. In Vanuatu, we also noted something to do with messaging, consistent messaging of warnings that we need to relay to the people out there in the community that needs to understand, but also the fact that information or information dissemination, sometimes it can be very costly. So for Vanuatu, we have established a call center for warning services. In times of tropical cyclones, or when there is a warning that is up, people can call the office through a free call number and get the information without any cost. That's something that we learned, that even though warning centers can have very good systems, can have very advanced infrastructure for warning services, but if the people cannot access it, then the warnings become useless. So it's very important to develop systems for warning dissemination. I think that is the last part of the warning system cycle that needs to be developed and needs to have better attention on to ensure that the warning centers, when they issue warnings, people out there that are concerned have to receive the warning consent, and the messaging has to be consistent. Whatever the warning it is, whether for volcanic eruption, for earthquake, or for tropical cyclones or severe weather, but all the messaging have to be consistent. And in a country where you have different languages to speak, warning services have to be in the languages that the people can read and understand what the warnings say. The other part of the challenge or the issue that we need to see is the harmonization between the responding agencies and the warning services, the warning centers. Systems have to be harmonized. Whenever there is a warning issued, then the reaction to the warning is another issue that need to be mended or need to be harmonized between warning centers and responding agencies. And these are key issues that we identified in Vanuatu and that we are working on right now to solve in order to improve the services that we provide in terms of warning to our people. Because if we don't provide a message that can cause people to react for their safety, then the warning service is not really relevant. So harmonization between the responding agencies and warning centers is very, very important, and we need to look at and I have attention on and to really ensure that all things are harmonized in terms of SOPs and messaging and how people react to the warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That's very useful. So I think one of the key messages that I'm getting from your responses is that the warning systems have to take a holistic approach. You set up the system and you have to make sure that whatever messages that you're giving out has to reach the last man. I think that's one of the key messages from your responses, and also standardized messaging, making sure that the systems are harmonized. And also from the case of Samoa, you have to have a good policy framework in place to make sure that the system is effective and it's responding to the needs of the people. So it will be interesting to see how Samoa rolls out its new national multi-asset early warning system. So I'd like to just open up the floor for one question from the audience for any particular countries. Any question or comment before I wrap up the session? Okay, I take silence as all is good. So, look, thank you so much for the presenters. It comes out very clear that the countries have continued to strive on to progress their resilience building activities, but obviously you faced a lot of challenges as well in terms of capacity and also financial resources. And we're glad that we have donors and development partners supporting us in the region, and in particular for the Pacific, EU has been one of our main supporting partners, working closely with the World Bank, but also the other development partners to provide support to the respective countries. So, I'd like to thank EU for the tremendous support that you've accorded to us. For the World Bank programs, we couldn't have done it without your support, and I'm pretty sure the same could be said for the specific Pacific countries, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. In fact, we've used some of your money in the past to leverage, item money to support the resilience investment in those particular countries. And, we were still accessing your trust funds to provide support, implementation support to the countries for their programs, and also bring in technical expertise to provide support and, support policy reforms, legislative activities and stuff to connect them to the investments and, to bring resilience much more louder, bring it elevated to the national level to be part of the ongoing dialogue. So, I really appreciate the support that you've provided us, and I look forward to continue working with the EU through the EDF11 and also the Pacific countries in the next coming years in the region. So on the World Bank side, thank you so much, and thank you to the presenters, and thank you to the listeners out there. Thank you.